morning, Andile.
Good morning, Tenny. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Yes.
Some topical events over the last few days in internet governance, and I thought we'd just bring you in and get you to chat about them. Your take, perhaps give us some background, and then lead us to where we are now with the US having ceded control of ICANN to the global multi-stakeholder.
This is a very, I must say, Tenny, this is a very interesting development.
Yes.
It's a historical moment, in fact, for not only in my view, for the internet community, or not only for the whole internet environment or ecosystem. I think it is a milestone for the world at large. I mean, I think, you know, if you look at the history of the internet from DAPRA to all the people who did a great job, I mean, Vincef, Pastels and others, I think they did a great job to almost build the internet to be this ecosystem where everybody is equal.
Yes.
I mean, I think this is the greatness of the internet, is that all stakeholders have an equal say in the way in which the internet or the future of the internet will be. I think looking at the history of the internet, either whether you look at ICANN or different institutions that have been involved, I mean, the spirit of ICANN has been that of openness, where boards, I mean, meetings or at large or different stakeholder groups discuss openly. You can see what's happening and be able to participate as an ordinary citizen of the world, or as a government, or as an NGO, or as a business. You know, it doesn't matter where you are. And I think, you know, the US has had these functions, we all know, right? The domain name system, I mean, the root server, etc. I mean, and I think, I mean, the fact that they've taken this decision, the transition is going to run between now and I think September of 2015. And in the press release that they issued on Friday, is they've asked ICANN to actually be the one that is going to manage this multi-stakeholder ecosystem to ensure that, you know, the globalization of these functions. It's a great thing to have happened in the industry. It's something that as we build the Internet of Things, as we build big data, as we see the internet almost playing a critical role in the way in which the global economy is running. I mean, as we move into the digital economy, this is the best decision that has ever been taken, in my view, in the history of the internet. It's going to bring about, you know, in my view, I mean, a lot of debate in the world as to what type of institution and structure. I think, you know, some of us who know the president of ICANN, I mean, Fadi, I mean, I think he is going to be the one responsible to put communities together to lead us to this new environment whereby there is truly globalized ICANN and globalized functions of the DNS.
And related to what you're saying, talking about the Internet of Things and big data, my understanding has always been that nation states want a level of control on the internet because they see it as an extension of their sovereign lands. Now, the question I then have is, how then does this internationalization model,
globalization,
yes.
I use, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, this globalization then of the internet work, and how then do you see the IGF working with ICANN in this new, in this reconstructed internet, as it were?
I think the way I see it is that, you know, I mean, the next meeting of ICANN is coming now before end of March in Singapore.
Yes.
I mean, I think that is where the beginning of this process will start. The way I look at it, I mean, this whole process of global internet governance, it's a journey.
Yes.
I mean, you know, whether Singapore or Brazil, this is a journey to ultimately come up with what is in the best interest of all stakeholders, right? I think, in my view, internet must be treated as the internet. We must not take what really, I mean, is
International relations
model.
Yeah.
Yes, well put. What we must not take, in my view, right, what we saw in multilateralism and think that is going to apply on the digital internet. By the way, if you look at the history of multilateralism, right, there was the Vienna Congress, right? And which, if you look at the Vienna Congress, I mean, or the Vienna Conference in Europe, I mean, I think it was in the 18th century, right? It came as a result of the Napoleon Wars. And then including the Berlin Conference came in because of trying to address issues of you know, borders in colonized land, right? Even when you fast forward that and you look at the League of Nations, when and how it was formed, right? And later the UN post-Second World War. All these institutions, this multilateralism, right, has been a reaction on the basis of certain things that have happened. We must not take, in my view, that model, basically, and bring it into the digital world. Right? Let's allow the digital world. By the way, the world had no borders before, right? It's humans that created borders, right?
Yes.
Right? My view, let's not create borders on the internet, right? Let's not fragment the internet. I mean, the internet is one, and let's keep the internet as one, and let's allow, for instance, people to get into the internet. We must create a spirit of freedom, a spirit of human rights on the internet, and a spirit of, I mean, being free and people able to engage each other irrespective of color or creed. And that's what the spirit of the internet is. I mean, I think it's one of the best things that humanity ever created. I mean, today we have a third of the people of the world on the internet. I think what is critical for all of us is to say, how do we make it a point that the 7 billion people, all of them are on the internet? And how do we ensure that by 2022 or 25, 50 billion things are connected on the internet? I mean, rather than to want to create borders as if it's the Vienna Conference or it's the Berlin Conference that created borders in the world, you know, somewhere in the 17th and 18th century. I mean, which subsequently, you know, those things followed in what we know as the multilateralism. I think we need an environment whereby all stakeholders are equal and the same. I mean, as long as we build responsibility, as long as we come up with good governance, whereby interests of civil society, business, and government are well looked after.
Yes. And talking about the responsibility and I suppose this balance between the different stakeholders, what's also been topical recently, I imagine over the last year or two, suppose it's best to start with WikiLeaks and then perhaps speak about Snowden and the treasure troves that he flunked on the internet, the response of the Brazilian president, the response of the Germans, and you know, it's just to get your sense around.
Look, I mean, I think the most important thing where we should focus on as the internet community is how we build an internet that is, for instance, responsible, you know, whereby, you know, we create good principles when it comes to privacy at one level and freedom of speech at another level, where all the principles of human rights globally apply on the internet. But at the same time, issues of being responsible are critical. I mean, and all of us as citizens of the world, you know, there are children that need to be looked after, and children have rights, and we need to take into consideration that. And we need to respect sovereignty of nations. Also, that's very important. It is that balance, really, you know, that is required in order to make this ecosystem of the internet to function very well, right? And we don't need one extreme versus the other. I mean, those things, you know, are not going to work. I mean, and again, the critical issue is to try and make it a point that, you know, we don't build conflict on the internet. You know, the internet, as the Brazilian president said in the UN, that must never be a battlefield. You know, the internet must be a platform that is used for peace and advancing humanity and ensuring that, you know, it's a platform to ensure that where women and men, children and adults, all states, nation states are able to communicate between each other to build harmony in the universe that we live in.
And just following on from that, well, speaking about the internet penetration globally, saying that there's a third online, in Africa, in our context, we see that being, way less than that. My question then becomes, is our voice in matters regarding internet governance as muted as, say, our internet penetration would suggest, or are we boxing above our weight division when it comes to?
I think, Tenny, if you would have attended a conference in 1990 of telecoms, people would say there are more telephones in Manhattan than in the African continent.
Yes.
Now imagine Manhattan is this small, right? And Africa is 30 million square kilometers. Yes. We now have 1 billion people, right? Today, in fact, by 2016, in fact, we will reach 1 billion mobile phones, right? Which 20 years ago, it was unthinkable that this would happen. Again, I repeat, let us look at Africa as a continent that will have internet connectivity. Within a decade from now, everybody will be connected on the internet in the continent. That is how we should think about ourselves. That's how we should plan the future. And 10 years is a very short time. To me, what is critical is not just those internet connections. It's about the applications that are built by Africans, right, which would address our respective languages, which would address our respective culture, which would address, the issues that are very African in nature. Critical is, what do we do to build our own OTT layer, our own application layer, so that as we reach 1 billion mobile phones, the future generations have applications to engage with. Now, the critical issue when we talk about applications is there are two schools of thought today that we see in the world. There's a school of thought of, native apps, that come out of, Android, iOS, Symbian, BlackBerry, Ubuntu, etc. And then on the other side, you have an open platform of the web, which is being promoted by W3C in the form of HTML5. What do we do in this environment, right? I mean, for me, all these things will exist in the world, right? But taking into consideration the African continent, right, that, my view, having seen closed community and open community in the world, I mean, we should adopt, for instance, platforms which are open, right? Let's take an open view in as far as, the application layer, for instance, at a device level. I mean, let's take an open view in as far as, we build applications that are very much web-based so that they can be accessible anywhere, anyhow, right? And the other thing to us that is critical is the affordability of applications and the affordability of connectivity, basically. We need to take into consideration the total cost of ownership of the device and the applications that then people will need. Primary applications to us are health applications, trading applications, and the ability for people to be educated, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong in all the modern sophisticated applications that you see in the rest of the native apps environment. That's still fine, but we need to think about where Africa is, where we are in terms of income levels, where we are in terms of connectivity, and what do we believe is the best platform to build. I would advise, for instance, if you would ask me to say, if you would be advising governments, I would say that what should governments be building their apps on? I mean, governments should use an open platform. Governments should use the web. Governments should use HTML5. They should be the ones who basically build an open platform using open standards, basically, so that it doesn't matter what device you have, you can be able to access government applications. If governments can start like that, then they will encourage a much more open ecosystem in the way in which we do things in the African continent.
And I suppose to ask, is this what you'll then be taken forth to Brazil to the?
No, I'm chairing
Okay.
chairing in Brazil amongst
Can you just tell the audience?
the Brazilian Net Mundial, basically. I mean, you can Google Net Mundial. I mean, you will see what's happening there. I mean, a lot of people have already submitted their views. I mean, I think the closing date was on the 8th of March. And lots of more than 120 submissions have been put in by governments, by nation states, by private companies, by various civil society groups, and by individuals, by various stakeholders in the world.
Yes.
And people, you know, I think this is going to be a very successful conference, Net Mundial. I think it's going to pave way in ensuring that, you know, this global dialogue, this journey, I mean, towards, I mean, an Internet of Things, towards big data, this journey towards an almost all-inclusive, multi-stakeholder Internet governance is certainly going to happen. Brazil is part of the journey, and we are looking forward, really, you know, to go there. And as I've said, my role is chairing. I mean, I'm not there to express views, but is to allow all stakeholders equal opportunity to participate. I think it's a great conference. I mean, we must thank Brazilians really for doing this. I think it's going to allow, you know, quite an interesting dialogue between people. So from Singapore, then there's Brazil, and there are subsequent, then there's the meeting in the UK in June, and then you have, you know, IGF in Turkey, and then later you have the ITU. We'll see how all these meetings are going to pan out. But I think the critical issue is that we need to bear in mind that global GDP is almost in the next year or two going to be 10% driven by internet economy. And this is growing almost at a double digit. And that by almost by 2020 and beyond, global GDP, the percentage of, you know, GDP that is internet driven would have reached over 20%. So issues of the internet are very critical. This is not just something that should be seen in isolation. It should be seen in the context of building the future economy of the world. Yeah.
Okay. With the internet playing such an increasing role in global economics and global productivity, do you think that internet governance is given the kind of attention that it deserves from leaders in all spheres of life, be it government, the private sector, or even civil society?
I think it is, and it's still going to increase. Okay. I mean, if you take fora like the World Economic Forum today, they have, I mean, as part of their agenda items, internet governance. I mean, if you take the EU, for instance, if you take the UN, IGF is as a result of WSIS, WSIS is as a result of the UN. So there is, I mean, and sometimes it's things that trigger this interest. I mean, it's things such as, you know, cybersecurity, you know, that trigger more interest in people to say, oh, hang on, this thing is very important. I think, in my view, I mean, the importance of the internet should not be influenced by events, but nation states, civil society, private sector should look at internet issues, because the internet economy is the future. I mean, what's going to drive it? If you remember what could have happened, or the nature of the debate during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, how people, you know, just picture and take literature and look at that. I think we are at the beginning of something bigger than all of us could think, can imagine, really. I mean, I put a parallel of what was happening in the world. I mean, a lot of economic models were designed based on the Industrial Revolution. And people came up and studied that birth of the Industrial Revolution. And a lot of models, I mean, urbanization came as a result of that. Issues of, I mean, multinational enterprises, you know, research and development. A lot of things came as a result of Industrial Revolution. I think what we are witnessing today is even more than what really humanity experienced during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. All those locomotives, steam engines, and all those type of things. This is, in my view, much, much bigger than what we saw in that time, basically. And therefore, that's why it's important for nation states, that's why it's important for business, for civil society to take interest. Where on earth in the last 100 or 200 or 300 years have you ever find companies having customers that are more than 1 billion people?
No, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
You understand?
Yes. Yeah.
It has never happened.
Yes.
So that is why, before multinationals would grow and talk about a customer base and being in all countries, but they've never thought that in the last 100 or two, it's only in the last 10 years or so that people are able to say, in our platform we have more than 1 billion people, or generally somebody would put a song on the internet and get 1 billion people interested to download it. People have produced records, people have produced things, and none of these things really would be, affecting all such things. So today you see a lot of these developments which are changing the way in which we understand technology, basically. Yeah.
And related to that, talking about these huge multinationals, whose revenues in part exceed numerous countries, I just like to put it to you, and perhaps it's a bit of a curveball to say, are they then not, if the internet is this open platform where everybody is equal and nation states take not a reduced role, but take equal footing with private business, civil society, and NGOs, is it then not to say that we elevate the status of these private companies just because of the revenues they...
It's not about that. No. It's not about that. I think we should understand the internet ecosystem. That really to be on the internet that's why a lot of people almost drift back to the traditional multilateralism that I've talked about, which has been created by human beings, by the way. As I've said, from the Vienna conference, the Berlin conference, League of Nations, United Nations, and other institutions going forward. These are all human-created models, basically. And therefore, in life, in my view, we should be very careful taking what is an advanced technology and want to model it to what was decided 2 or 3 centuries ago. There's nothing wrong, basically, in the model of multilateralism. By the way, I'm sure you are aware that there are a number of countries who argue today for the reform of that multilateralism. But I'm not going to go into that at the moment, but just to say that I think we should treat internet as the internet, all right? And not say, let's apply multilateralism into the internet and the functioning of the internet.
Okay, so we need not be concerned about dominant internet companies.
I don't think, in my view, I think the way the internet is going to be is open. And people have rights, and it must be free, and it must be one internet, right? And innovation will come from where you least expect, in my view. Innovation will come from where you least expect. Nobody thought that it could be a song from South Korea that will take 1 billion people, because views of people almost are directed that music would come from certain countries. There will be future enterprises that will come from the continent that will be the biggest enterprises on the internet, basically. I can guarantee you that. To give you an example, Nollywood is the second largest movie producing platform in the world. Imagine you take this platform onto the internet. What will happen? You will see in the future that Africa might be the biggest content producer in the world, whereby we will export that content to different other continents of the world. So we must not confine ourselves. In particular, as the African continent, we must be open. How do we use the internet to export our products, to export our culture, to export what we do and what really we are all about, right? We must not only think about things coming this way. That's why I talk about building platforms In my view, there's a lot of wealth given the diversity of language that you find in the African continent, generally because of who we are. How do we use the internet to basically grow and develop and make it a point that our content is something that is valued in different parts of the world, basically? That's how I see it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And
Thanks.
for your time as well.
Thanks. Yeah.